participating member
I heard that.
who's not comfortable with this additional invasion of privacy along with all the other kinds of invasions we have with technology.
Sure.
And I, for one, I'm sure the rest of the committee members are not happy about not being able to have her participate with us. And I just wanted you to talk to us about your thoughts on recording the meetings.
Of course.
Given that we do eventually get the minutes online, and that the public is welcome to personally attend. So I'd like you to.
Yeah, that's a good one. By the way, I brought, and unfortunately it's in hard copy. We can get it to everybody. This is the slightly revised guidelines for committees, boards in the town. I found out through learning curve that this has existed for years. When we were trying to do something with another committee, basically reconstituting it, we wanted guidelines, and we were looking at other towns' guidelines. Well, we had our own. It was pretty darn good. It was updated and approved last week, week and a half ago.
Week and a half ago.
This is generic guidelines for committees.
Period. Yes. And it gets into things like what you heard about FOA, and, because you are susceptible to being, FOA information, freedom of information. You all know that. You, in your positions, don't have to go through the training, but you need to be aware it's there. Little things like that. And then in doing the review, remember, part of the challenge for us has been, I was talking earlier with y'all about a couple of people, it relates to the, how do we best get the knowledge out of what all the hard work committees are doing in their meetings that it's difficult to translate to the select board in the town. What I mean by that is, Mark comes here and diligently reports, and I do the same thing as liaison to other committees, and report what I believe is important to the select board to hear. It's screened. We have limited time during select board meetings. So, and we have this new system. So we said in this that's where this requirement came from. In the here requires that all meetings will be video recorded. Why?
It says that here.
It does. It does. It's one of the few changes that were made.
Oh, you just added that?
A week and a half ago, right,
okay.
Mark? It was a week and a half ago to reinforce it. We did reinforce a few other things too. We're having challenge with getting, without also requiring Anita to come to every other select board meeting to tell us what's going on. And I'm just exaggerating and make a point here. What goes on is if I see something on your agenda, which I do see, and I can go to the video recording and see what was discussed about it. And it really has a benefit to those of us who want to see what's going on in the Harbor Committee, because we have 21 committees. Yeah. That's why Mark used to have black hair. But seriously though, it's quite. We don't know that we have the right answer. I do not know, and I won't tell you that videoing everything is the right answer. We're trying to see how it would work. We're open to suggestions. That's why I'm giving this to you all to take a look at. Anita as chair, you can take a look and share it with the other members. Certainly, it's online. We can get it electronically, but it's the entire intent is just to spread the information in a more efficient manner. That's the objective.
I think there are a couple other things as well that we've discovered is more people can watch the meetings, be aware of them, because you can always say, well, you can go to the minutes, but it doesn't translate quite as well. And if we involve more people in the town, that's the goal. The more people we can involve in knowing what's going on, it's important. And also getting out the nuances of what we're working on. The last meeting, I know Pete talked extensively about solar and why it's important, and you just can't get that from the minutes.
Sure.
It is important. I also can say I go to a lot of committee meetings, and there have been no other meetings where they were uncomfortable with the filming. So it's unique to this.
It was this one situation, but I understand it a little bit. People like to be candid, and I do too. And I'm not talking about yelling and screaming. We're just talking about being candid. For example, there are things we could discuss here tonight that I might want to not use names on because there's some negotiations going on, and I have to be careful because there are legal issues involved. Again, on the other hand, I want to be completely open, but I can't. So there are negatives to having something videoed. I have to agree. And like I said, we're trying it. And I think other committees have kind of blanched against it. a little
Nobody's
bit.
been,
Nobody's dropped off because of it.
yes.
You're correct, Mark. I know Parks and Rec had some questions about it. One other committee that likes to meet at 7:30 in the morning on certain weekdays, that's not going to work anymore because, we don't have all of us knowledgeable how to turn it on and turn it off. It's a bit of a problem. So I don't know if that's what you were aiming for, but that's really where we're trying to make it more efficient. We're in an age of electronics. We're trying to use it to the town's collective advantage. And I agree, Mark, there are people who are out there in our community who are interested in certain committees. They're interested in Parks and Rec. They're interested in harbor, energy, and sustainability certainly is a big one, very big one, et cetera, et cetera. See that.
How do you actually succeed in recording all the committees? I didn't think they all met in this one room. Are you able to?
Now, they do now. That's one of the ones I was talking about. One of the committees like to meet in the summer at the yacht club because it was kind of nice to meet out there in a nice venue. That's not going to happen anymore. And
Pathways, which goes back and forth between Rockport and Camden?
Well, Rockport has a videoing capability also that they should be using. That's a combined committee. It's rare that we have a combined. I think it's the only one that says combined as that one. So it's a little, it's not 100% yet. But yeah, principally, this morning we had a meeting and we wanted a video, and the room was double booked with a training session. We had to move the training session up to the Tucker room and record in here. So
There are a couple situations where, for whatever reasons, a couple committees have meetings scheduled at the same time. So we have to,
Yep.
And we've run into that a lot.
It's not 100%, but we're doing the best we can.
You're not going to be shocked if you don't record it, but we're pressuring to please record when when those room is available and the videos are available.
So if we have a conflict often, for instance, since we're Mondays, often we run into holidays.
No.
Often. President's
Mm-hmm.
Day,
Sure.
blah, blah,
Memorial
Martin
Day.
Luther King Day, all these, and we can't meet on that Monday because
Yeah.
it's official town policy that we don't.
Right.
So then we have to meet when another committee is meeting, a different Monday or something like that.
And you may not.
What
both
I
get
wanted to
recorded.
ask you is to whom should we make the inquiry about scheduling? Would that be Janice?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Black and white. She has control of scheduling this room, and you can meet any a different time you'd like, as long as it's not being used. And it's
Janice Easency is the scheduler.
That is correct.
Easency, yeah.
Yeah, that's correct. ESANCY. And she has control of the scheduling of this room. Technically, the Tucker room is controlled by our Opera House committee group. I'm sorry, Opera House director.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
But she can coordinate that.
so when we try to find a time, our committee will just have to
Yep,
do that by email after our meeting. If we-
yep. Find another time and place if you can.
Thank you. Can we move on?
It's your
Since I'm
choice.
gonna
You're the
Ask
chair.
you so much. Would you like to tell?
I'm sorry, can I ask
Yes,
just
please.
a quick question for you guys? Are you tracking the people that use, or at least the numbers of,
In general terms, we
Runs or-
don't have a police force for it, no. And we won't.
would you know if it's select board members or just community more broadly that
Yep.
are tapping,
Yeah,
using the?
yeah. Well, what happens is sometimes persons say, well, I thought you were recording the meetings and I can't find the Energy Committee from Monday, May 20th. And say, oh, okay, let us check. And by the way, we've also had recording problems because
Yeah.
this is not black and white. It's not that easy. And sometimes we had one that recorded all black. We had one that recorded for 6 hours because nobody shut it off, and YouTube almost threw us off the YouTube channel. So we had some issues to deal with, but we don't really know.
It's a new system, so we're still.
Yeah.
Juniper was just down here, just still refining the
Yep.
directions, trying to simplify it. She's made
Yep.
a number of changes already to help people
Right.
be able to turn on and turn it off.
We had
So
trouble
it's-
with the Pathways Committee, couldn't get it to cooperate.
Understood.
I think
Work
you
in
meant,
progress.
is there a way to track who is clicking on the recording and watching it? Is that what you meant?
Who's benefiting from
Or
the
the
extra work?
analytics of,
That, we don't know that. We know, our select board's been on the air forever, with our meetings. Unless somebody texts me during the meeting and says, what the heck are you talking about? I don't know that they're watching. We don't have any way to monitor it at
I
this point.
believe you can't tell who's watching, but you can tell the number of people that have watched the meeting.
Yes,
Or the number of,
yes.
it could be one
That would be
person
helpful.
watching it 20
Yes.
times, but you can tell how many times the meeting has been watched on
Watched.
YouTube.
Yes, we can get that.
Okay. So I guess I'm just thinking at the end of the year, or, we're going to
Yeah.
evaluate how.
Yeah, there's one person watching, it may not be worth it. Yeah,
Work
yeah,
it is, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Good question.
So I'm thinking, Yeah,
I
did
just
you have
wanna-
another question about that?
just make an observation that we're going to hear soon from you that there about some interesting negotiations which are for legal reasons confidential, right? So that is often, you could apply similar logic to sort of committee strategies around, sensitive matters that might arise that would be of a similar nature. And so how would you have the committee go about the business of doing those things? It's just a question. I don't think there's an answer per se.
Off the mics then or something?
Well, if you're talking about the situation where a bunch of, I'm trying to think of a situation where that might occur, because a committee is making a recommendation on something to a select board, maybe, would you review an RFP? I don't know if you'd even do that. It's really a town function, but I don't know, Pete. I don't know the answer to your question, but it's a good point, though. But if something comes up that is, in your chair's general feeling that it's absolutely not essential for the world to be watching, discussing with one of the members why they haven't attended, or, it doesn't have to be recorded. I mean, let's not get silly, but I don't know the other reasons.
I think you can always choose to, at the end of the meeting, we have executive sessions, maybe an unofficial executive
Yeah,
session.
unofficial, yeah.
At the end of the meeting, if there's some discussion you want to have that's not public, so you can always wait till the meeting's over.
Yeah, and especially if you have a committee problem. I mean, we've had cases where some people had some problems with a couple of committee members, and you don't want to be discussing that on air. Don't do it. Turn it off and talk to each other and be kind to each other and try to work it out. Absolutely. I trust your judgments, I have to. We can't make rules for everything. It doesn't work.
Would you like to meet the members of the
I
committee?
would.
Yes. Anita Borsi-Scott, Chair. And turn on your mic, Anna, and just go around and introduce yourselves.
Right, Brian?
Brian Robinson.
Anna Ford?
Bruce Means?
Sarah Miller.
Pete Kalajian, Vice Chair.
I'm Mark Ratner, I sit next to you.
Oh, you're that Mark Ratner, okay.
Our Select Board Liaison, thank you, Mark.
Correct, he is. And a good one, by the way. Dedicated.
So all these people have some really great interest in and background in energy-related,
Perfect, they should. Good, that's great.
except for me. I'm the odd one.
Well, sometimes you can pick it up real quickly, too,
So, anyway, thank you. Can we move to the next item? Did you want to discuss the hiring of Rich Roughgarden?
Oh, sure. Well, yes, I'll discuss all these items. I can cover them. They were really, for the most part, covered in, I don't know if you had a chance to see
Yeah.
the memo from, and I thought it was rather complete, honestly.
I have a
But-
couple extra copies of the memo
Sure.
if anybody missed it.
From.
That I sent, that Jeremy sent.
Jeremy.
The addendum to the,
It's-
just looking at
To the agenda.
Yeah, he sent out.
Else
He
need
was
a
supposed to be
copy?
here to discuss this, and he wasn't able to come, so.
Doctor's appointment, unfortunately, is what occurred.
Here.
So no, I did not
Okay.
receive this.
Well,
It was an attachment, a PDF attachment, I think, to you,
PDF attached.
to an email
agenda.
sent out on Saturday.
Is that what it's named?
No, it was not on with the draft minutes. It was sent out Saturday.
Okay. Can you check to make sure that I'm on that distribution list?
That'd be a good idea.
I did not get it.
Okay. Well, when it's there, and what the purpose was, Jeremy and I would talked about both coming, but Jeremy is our, our planning person, and there's a lot of stuff going on. It's kind of an exciting time for the town with things coming to a big crescendo in terms of the topic of, let's call it energy, as it were. Certainly one of them is a Rich Roughgarden, who is an individual who, for a number of years, has been in his own solar business, basically. He was referred to us by one of the supply companies here in Maine that we had met with and highly recommended for the purpose of providing some
Saturday, 7/11. All right, I'll look. Thank you.
input in terms of the qualitative and quantitative nature of options, in particular from a financial and also pragmatic perspective. And we met with Rich, and I was very impressed. He showed us a copy of a town, not to be named, that he did a report for, which he analyzed, similar options to what we've been looking at, you all too, for solar arrays on existing buildings, on
Of a different town?
a different town, yeah, and it wasn't, I can't show it to you because it was given to us in confidence. It's owned by that town, and he was, ethical enough not to allow it to be published out there. But I can tell you what's in it, and he did for them an energy survey of the town's uses. He did an evaluation of existing properties, schools, buildings, sound familiar? Centralized sites and off-town sites. And it was with lots of spreadsheets and lots of financial analyses that supported those. He did it all in 6 weeks. And for a very reasonable cost. I was impressed. So he has been engaged to do a similar thing, but maybe not quite the same scope because, we've already had some of this done by our school here. You know that. For the 2 million kilowatt hours, do we presume the town uses at this point in time? But he is heavily engaged in helping us with looking at some of these options that are there. And that will be his scope. It's still being defined because things are moving very quickly in some aspects. Some of the things are not moving as quickly as you like, especially in Augusta, but that's typical. I'm not overly concerned, but that's where Rich has been engaged. And we're really excited about getting his input because I think it's we get a lot of balls in the air right now from an energy perspective in terms of covering not just the town in terms of its energy needs, but also the discussions about residential commercial.
Could you take questions while you go? Or
Of course.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, to some extent, he was able to take advantage of the work that was done over at the Watershed School, or is there
Sure.
collaboration?
Oh, yeah, well, remember, we did meet also with with the school and discussing the mayor's covenant. But there's already been, a study that they did, which is very helpful in terms of their analysis of 1 year. What year was it, Pete? 17 or 16?
So let me just ask a question regarding the communications between Rich and Janet McMahon and the climate change class, because it seems like that would be really important to have that discussion early on so that we're not working
Cross purposes.
or duplicating efforts.
Worse.
So do we know if that's occurred?
I doubt it.
When does he start?
We're still engaged in, from what I even see from Jeremy, from discussing scope. So he hasn't started anything yet.
Okay.
And so,
Do we have a timeline for when he starts?
I would have to guess it would be June.
Okay, so he will be through with the report. Okay.
So I think the timing might work well, Pete, I'm hoping.
Okay.
But I understood, good question. But I think, Rich, you gotta understand, there's a backdrop here too. There's another item that's on your agenda, I know, but we've been wrestling a little bit with revision because of the solar farm up in Sagamore. We have some issues up there. They'll get solved. But shoulda, coulda, woulda, it's always hindsight. We needed, in hindsight, better insight into the subtle elements of a PPA. And it's a specialty. I mean, we're not, I don't pretend to be expert in it. Did we do anything really bad? No. Could we have done it better? Yeah. Yeah. And that's where we see him helping us out.
So you feel that Mr. Roughgarden can help us with that sort of thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, he looked at the PPA on a number of them. He showed us, including here, and said, you probably shoulda, coulda, woulda done this. It wasn't huge, but it was subtle.
Okay, and as you work out the scope with him, are you,
With Rich.
one of the things that Watershed is doing, this climate change class, is I believe that they're going to come up with the goals for the town that they will propose that the town adopt. Is that correct?
Well, this is risk assessment and probably initial sort of areas to set goals, so I don't know that the goals will be totally set by the end, but there'll be some broad, there'll be, with the risk assessment, it will be a funnel towards, goals that are going to be important.
So
That's the report right now, Pete.
Yeah.
wouldn't the select board be wanting to give him the goal as the very first, overarching?
How soon is it going to be ready, Pete?
And I think this is really important, Bob, and I hope that you can hear clearly what we're trying to say is that we already have a framework in place, which is what we've signed on to be doing. Mm-hmm. And that framework has timelines. And so really, if we're going to hire somebody as an energy consultant, they better be working on the implementation of the third year of the Global Covenant of Mayors, because that's what we said we were going to do. And so if it concerns me greatly that that's not a clear message being sent, that we have signed on, the select board has voted, we have been working with this process for a year and a half, coming on 2 years, and we hope to be completed with the process because we said we were going to by year 3, and that's what this person should be focused on.
Well,
And in the doing, they will also be coming up with these recommendations, but we already have this overarching framework. Let's make sure that he understands what is that framework, what are the goals, what are the timelines, how do I help the town to meet this, if we're not doing that, I'd like to sound a really pretty strong alarm.
so my understanding is that when we signed on to the Global Covenant of Mayors, we did not specify the specific goals
Correct.
that we as a town want to meet, and that is what these 3 years are going to help us get to. But Mr. Garden needs to know what those goals, either know what the goals are that the town wants, or help the town come up with the goals, or
Correct.
work with Watershed and the Global Covenant of Mayors in setting those goals. But the goals are the most important thing. I mean, we can reduce energy, but we want to know how much by how soon, too. And we're delighted that you've taken the step to hire him, as long as he's sort of understands that this is kind of where we need to go, is to
He
form
completely
those goals.
understands that we're engaged in the Global Covenant, and he's been engaged in stuff like this before. I think, some of the places, if there's an overlap, we'll find out. If there's not, that's great, because the town has set a policy objective to move as rapidly as possible with energy conservation measures on buildings, which we'll discuss next, on potential commercial, residential options. I don't think there will be any overlap, but.
What do you mean by overlap?
Well, I mean, that somebody's saying we're going to, do X and we're doing for energy reduction, and we're doing something that might be considered Y. I don't know. I haven't seen the report from the watershed, so I can't comment on it.
Okay, Bob, I think, I'm sorry to press here a little bit, but my question is, again, the select board having signed on to the Global Covenant of Mayors, and one of the reasons why this committee worked to have the town adopt that was so that we do have a framework. So it seems counterproductive to, and again, since we're still working on scope, I think that the message that I hope that I believe that the rest of the committee would share with me is that in that scoping, we should be saying, it's very important that we work using the framework, because that is going to get us to the place we need to be, and we really do need resources.
Well, my question would be, since he's being hired to advise on a number of different aspects, including residences?
No, right now it's really looking at that's a parallel issue, but no, right now it's looking at the town's objective to again, increase solar array.
Okay.
So that's the primary one. But let me just finish my question, then Anna will ask you. But, so do we need to hurry up and come up with that end goal, if it's carbon neutral by
No.
2050, or whatever the end goal is?
No, I don't see that connection.
While we
no.
still have him on board to help us?
No,
Or
no.
we can bring him back on board another time?
Yeah, I mean, this committee put out a report to the select board recommending certain solar options, and that kind of
Okay.
helped us to precipitate this.
The solar is kind of where
Oh,
we're
yeah,
focused,
oh, yeah,
just to get
oh, yeah,
started. Anna,
yes.
did you have a question?
That was actually my clarifying question, is in this memo, it seems as though his scope of work as a consultant will be limited to or
Yeah,
focused
wasn't I
on
clear on
solar.
that? Wasn't I clear on that?
On assessing
but, okay,
municipal
that-
options for solar.
No, well, I get clarity, I'm getting clarity.
It might be helpful if the actual scope of work could be shared with us at some point, or the goal of it, just to see where it,
Well, I mean, Jerry has stated, I believe the goal of it is to look at what our options are for, in the numerous, for getting the town to a place where the town is completely on renewable energy sources, completely. That's the objective.
okay.
Now, there's more than one avenue to get there. There's more than one avenue. They're going on in parallel. And this one is focused, this piece is focused on the solar option.
And so and it's,
That's good.
are we, yeah, that sounds very, I'm glad to hear it. And I understand that that you're probably not, writing down timelines at this point, but it would be good to continue to remember that in a global climate emergency the speed of adoption is and this is where we say things like, could we have got a better deal with Sagamore Farms? Surely we could have, and we're likely to be able to, weighing all our options, find a slightly better deal, and if we wait a little bit longer, maybe deals will get better. But I think from my perspective, and I think you know this already, but since we're being recorded, it would be important to that alacrity and the speed at which these things are done, given the generally glacial pace of municipal, the way forward with municipalities. I'm not making a value judgment, I'm just stating a fact. We do, I believe, in a climate emergency, need to be ramping up the speed at which we do these things. And I would like to propose that the Energy Committee can be an ally in that regard, taking some of the workload off of the town. But it's,
Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
speaking of speed, he has limited time. We have 10 bullets. We need to get through them. But I think he's got your message.
I would like to add one thing. I think that the whole purpose of him is to speed the process up. And I can tell you that in the conversations with Jeremy, I got together with him last week.
Right.
His emphasis on energy has come to the forefront of his job. He's making that thing, and I think
great.
Audra is working in a similar vein at this point.
And we just want to be allies, so tell us how.
Yeah, so I think
Excellent point. We'll discuss that before.
Pete, your mic is off.
Push your button.
We want to be allies.
I would like to just, I don't know if you guys have more questions. I just wanted to read for those listening that the last part of this section about the solar proposals, where Jeremy says, it is our being the town of Camden,
Right.
objective to purchase 100% of the town's electrical usage from renewable sources in the near future. And my understanding is that the towns means municipal.
Exactly, it's what I refer to, and I call it the 2 million kilowatt hours, half of which is Snowball and half of which is the rest of the town. That's the primary focus.
Thank you. I just wanted to read that part
That's
to make
correct.
to
That's
make that clear.
correct.
Did anybody else have any thoughts or questions on
The
this?
only other, about renewable energy credits, I've been doing some research on that, and I'd be very interested to make sure that we weren't selling our renewable energy credits.
Understood.
One other thing I'll add in my conversation with Jeremy, he has definitely taken notice of the report from Watershed last year that said that the majority of electrical usage that needs to be repaired is residential. He saw that, noted it, and is working on plans to help that situation.
That's
So
that's coming up in the next couple
Bob,
items.
maybe
yeah.
telling us
That's
more
coming up
about
in the next
that.
couple items. I think it's very important that, in that regard. Right now, unfortunately, we have almost 50,000 credits that we're paying for and not getting credit for at the solar farm.
That's a problem.
And it's not, that's not going to kill the town. It's only 12 and a half cents times 50,000, whatever that number comes out to. But that's what we're
So-
trying to solve right now.
Well, let's get down to that. We might as well go in the order just to make things easier. Is there anything that, Sarah, did you want to say
And I'll
something?
go quickly. I support what you're saying about the need for speed and the importance of the goals completely. That said, I'd just like to register some concern about the notion of locking ourselves into long-term, multi-decade
Thank you.
We-
power
yeah.
purchase agreements. I
We'll-
think
we'll
it's
get-
a terrible idea.
That, when we get down to that section of the, yeah, good.
Open, we want to analyze everything, we want to, I don't want my judgment, your judgment, or Pete's judgment.
No, I concur.
We need to be careful, and as we
Absolutely.
have some of those options, as you know. That's all going to be considered. But we're not satisfied with just looking, town is not satisfied with just looking at this solar option thing.
Did you want to proceed with that solar array bullet and come back to the other ones?
I mean, the one about
Solar array work current status?
oh, yeah.
We've got that on the
Sure.
agenda, which addresses Sarah's
I think I've summarized
question.
what's going on.
Or should we go in order?
You mentioned it, I mentioned it at the select board, because of our meters, which are limited to 9 to 10, I forget the exact number. They originally planned those meters were selected because they was purported to be 170,000 kilowatt hours per year. Okay, well, didn't work. The actual solar plant is about 149,000 in production. Year to date is about 110,000 on the meters. So we got a bunch of credits. Unfortunately, those credits have been building every month. Now we're in the summer months, so the meters are slowing down a little bit, because we don't have as much heating. Anyway, we have at the moment about 50,000 energy credits, some of which are beginning to expire, because CMP only lets you have them so long, which I didn't know, by the way.
Here, rolling.
13 months. Okay, 13 months. We're about 13 months into the process of this solar plan, maybe 14 months into the process.
So can we switch accounts? That's no big
Yeah,
deal.
Every 6
Two
months.
things
right?
going on there, Pete. One is, we've got, Revision's working with us. They're going to grab all of our CMP bills, make sure we're getting our credits correctly.
So our and have you seen I went ahead and made that shared Google spreadsheet that carefully outlines all the town accounts and, makes it easy to understand where the accounts are.
I'd like to see that spreadsheet. I haven't seen it.
I sent
I'd like to get it again.
That's, instead of duplicating the effort, we've done that.
Yeah, whatever, but you get a lot of stuff. But I think that's fundamentally, we've got to get back to a place where we switch out a meter or two and get back to using them to energy that we're producing.
So I'd like to clarify, I'm following you because I've been following this along the way, but I think it's a little confusing. So if I can restate it and then you correct me, please. The rules and regulations at a state level required that an array may not offset more than 9 meters from an entity.
Correct.
So when we built our solar array, when our solar array was designed for us, they had to pick 9 of the town
Right.
meters. The town does not have 1 meter for the whole town.
Right.
They have separate meters in different
They have
places for
lots of
different
meters,
things.
yeah.
So what they had to do was find the meters that were basically the most expensive energy and that would fit, and you said that there was a maximum number of kilowatts that could be produced as well, is that correct?
Well, the solar plant is around 159,000 kilowatt hours per year.
That's what they're doing.
That's what they're designed, basically.
So there was a maximum in amount, in terms of the amount of production, so we couldn't go and pick the meters over the snowball, presumably. And there's another issue related to that. In any case, the 9 meters that were chosen to be offset contractually with CMP, it turns out they're not using as much electricity as
Correct.
we thought they would. Therefore, the solar panels are producing more energy than those 9 meters are using, which means that we're producing excess energy, which is going onto the grid. And the problem that Bob was trying to explain is that that extra energy we're not getting compensated for it. Is that correct?
We're sending 50,000 kilowatt hours into the grid somewhere we're paying for and getting no credit for it. Today.
So we're paying CMP
No, we're paying revision.
in revision.
Cents a kilowatt hour.
Oh, okay.
Well, we're actually not paying, we're paying them the excess, well, it's going to be a moot point with the new state law, that we'll be able to expand the number of accounts, so that there may be 1 or 2 months, which is a
This
problem.
the past issue and Bob was smart enough to look at all the charts and spreadsheets and
All the invoices.
realize that this is the problem. CMP permits you to switch out 1 meter for
Every
another.
6 months.
But it's only every 6 months. It's
Correct.
like you have to do it
Correct.
at a particular time, and otherwise you lose out. And then the amount produced is good for a year, and that can be applied against anything within those 12 months. But
Yep.
once those 12 months are up, as you still have extra energy, you lose it in terms of your credit.
It rolls off every 13th month.
Yeah, so that was just another way of saying what Bob just said. I don't know if it
I
helped.
think it's correct.
How many meters are there?
9.
No,
In total town meters, I'll send you the spreadsheet that has them all
It's a long.
carefully lined. There's probably 60 or so.
I bet that's that many. Yeah. This building may have 2 or 3, just not one.
They're all municipal?
They're all municipal.
Oh, yeah. This building could have more than one very easily, and probably does.
and like we'll have a sewage pump station
Yeah,
over there on
yeah,
Bayview Street
yeah,
that uses
yeah.
energy and
Yeah, there's
things like that. They're
lots of them.
scattered about.
And there's one other complicating factor is that there are 2 fee schedules, one for large accounts and one for small accounts.
Yes, that's true.
And so that's a complicating. So you want to pick the 9 largest small accounts for the solar to offset.
Right. Anyhow, that's the solar situation in Sagamore and in a capsule.
Great, thank you very much.
Sure.
So the energy surveys of municipal buildings,
I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda in front of me. Are we going to go over the other things that are happening in terms of?
we've got 10 items to be going over.
Right, I'm just asking additional array options. Or could you give a brief outline of what that's?
We're not there yet.
Oh, we're not
actually.
there yet.
Yeah, we're at the 3rd bullet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we are looking at, one of the things that the town is looking at is our municipal buildings are not in good shape for no rocket science, right, from an energy perspective. We are looking at the options of what we can do to try to analyze and get stuff onto the capital projects list to improvement. I mean, it could be a double pane window, it could be, insulating the roof of this building, which is not insulated, little things like that, that need to be done, and why wait? Right. By the way, when I say municipal buildings, Mark and I had a workshop this morning with our library. I include them in this capsule, even though they're not.
Yeah.
We don't control it day to day, but
Yes.
they have problems too, and we need to watch it across the board. That's what it's about. Go ahead, sir.
If I might.
Brian.
Did you receive my email
Thank you.
with
Yeah.
recommendation?
Thank you.
And you've also seen the Cordia report,
I did.
which was,
I did. It was very well done.
but that was not, it was not this kind of report. It was very focused on the retro recommissioning. So looking at the commissioning of the building, not the shell and these other aspects.
Right, right. What we're really looking for is what can we plow in the little holes that are lower cost to fix now? What we could plug into the budget for a bigger cost, maybe? Like doing the roof of this building, it's not insulated. The building is technically not insulated. It's double wide brick, but it's kind of insulated. But what can we do? And there's some of them are more expensive, and we have to watch the budget, of course. So that's what we're trying to identify. Get it on an active list. We have a capital plan we're trying to do out X years, and we got to get some of this thing in the capital plan. We shouldn't be waiting, you know. And by the way, I would be the first to admit, I bet this has been studied before somewhere. We just can't find it. And unfortunately, a lot of town, you mentioned town management, what happens is things get done and they get put on a shelf. That's not acceptable to us. Otherwise, Mark will hit me real hard. But anyway, that's that topic is. Going on, don't see the questions. The next one, how can the town encourage and help in energy saving measures for townspeople? We all recognize that the town in general, the town of Camden, commercial residential is probably in the range of 8 to 10 million kilowatt hours per year, probably. That's not so difficult to guesstimate because you know the average for a commercial user and a residential user, meaning you multiply times the number of tax bills we have, you kind of got it. In range, you know, we haven't pegged it. So it's 4 to 5 times what the town uses in electrical energy. This is not limited to electrical energy, but that's just one example. So many towns, you know better than I do, that have looked at various programs to utilize trust fund money to help people to do something, you know. It gets extremely pervasive because the options here go as far as towns that have created larger solar arrays and allowed townspeople to somehow play off of that rather than putting the solar on their own home. It goes on and on, but this is the general topic that's on this line item. We don't want to wait to think about these things. There's one I read, and I think it's the West Coast. They're doing, you know, kind of grant money kind of thing. It's like a trust to help people fund solar, and it may not be on their home, but some people resist that. Yeah, it may be a solar farm, it may be blah blah blah, and some of this could be tied to legislation too, you know. But
I mean, like a community solar project.
kind of like that. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. I don't want to limit it to that. But it does affect what we might do with solar arrays too. You know, it could have an impact on that, size-wise. We want to be open-minded, you know, to doing things. We have a lot of people here who can't afford to insulate their homes, like, insulation-wise. We got to find a way to help that. You know, we have a lot of old homes here. They're historic and not in great shape, and people, I know a number of them. They need help. They need help. We got to help them get their insulated, do something with the inserts and windows, whatever it is. You know, it may start small, but it could get bigger. That's the line item here. Just started, you know, and it all comes down to, understand, we're not satisfied with just waiting. You know, it's just not going to work. Now, we're not tied, at the moment, it's not tied to any number reduction, you know, that you're talking about, Pete, and the covenant. That's more macroscopic. This is let's get it done if we can, you know. So that's what that one's about.
I'm sorry, so the bullet, you're talking about how the town can,
encourage and
so
help
that's,
with energy savings.
that's the question, but what are the actions that you're using to explore that?
One of the things we were looking at.
Or we can help you explore that,
That's
I
a good
guess is the
question.
question.
One of the things where I think we need to look at is what other programs in other states and other towns are actually implementing and which one's the most successful. And then we, in parallel, we have to look at our financial capability to utilize trust money, for example, and those kinds of things. We're doing that right now. Because if you don't have money to do it with, you ain't going to get much done, right? So we're doing that part right now. But I think this one is not simple. But we've got to get our businesses and our residences conscious that we're the town of Camden is serious about this activity. That's the objective here. That's what I believe Mark and I and everybody agree we want to do. Now, how we implement it, we're getting there, one step at a time. Don't have all the answers to your questions yet. All right?
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Solar array, I talked about the credits. As far as options go, I mentioned rough garden, and what we're looking at, we're going to be looking at probably, sounds like to me, 3 or 4 areas. One is we're still not convinced that there aren't some uses, and there's one related here at the middle school, that we want him to look at, as he did with this other town, utilization of the school roofs, utilization of other buildings' roofs or whatever they may have available physically, to see if how that option might play. And you already looked at it, I know that. Got told structural doesn't work. Sorry, I'm not going to accept that. Well, it can be a factor, but we have buildings, I know it can be done. And we have a new middle school being built, and that's not off the list. Okay? That's one kind of area. The other area is new solar arrays on a site. We have probably 2 options in town. One includes Sagamore. One I'm not at liberty to talk about because we don't own it yet, and we may not. It's here in town, though. It's about 5 acres. The other one, is you've heard wind about, is in an adjacent town. I prefer not to utilize its name because we are in negotiation,
Yep.
and it is extremely hot, to the point where I worry about having to make a decision before we can make a decision because of legislation. But we could put qualifications on the acquisition. In other words, it's like buying a house and saying, it's contingent on an architecture review of the house. We can do some of those things, we believe.
Contingencies on the
Contingent
purchasing.
purchase, yeah. It's a very interesting site to me. It has all the bells and whistles of a site that can probably only be used for something like a solar array. Could never be utilized for development of any kind. It just won't work. Long story.
Or
That's one.
agriculture.
And by the way, we're not throwing out the Hinckley, Goodwill, Hinckley, whatever the name of it is.
Goodwill Hinckley.
It has its issue, but revision, when they came here, when Nita and I and Jeremy talked to them, and they talked, would you be interested in a remote site? We said, yeah, bring it. They did. So we need to look at that. There's a lot of elements to that one I think needs to be investigated very carefully, honestly. Not the least of which one you already mentioned, but there are others. There are many others actually, with revision to and its current, the corporate arrangement. So that's the other one. Probably that's the gamut. I don't think I've missed anything. I don't think.
Could you characterize a timeline for when you?
Well, we're certainly watching, and with revision, what's going to happen in Augusta in the next few weeks. We are definitely watching that very carefully. We had 2 conversations on that on Friday. Not black and white yet, but let's all be optimistic. There's a process we have to go through. This could possibly. By the way, one of the complications also is the size of this array. What size should it be? We've got to wrestle that down a little bit. What if this is a little bit more than just the town? I mean, is that a smart thing to think about? Probably.
To be able to sell shares to town members.
Thank you. Yeah, businesses, residences, or expandable to same. That's another option, right? So that's kind of what the array options in the capsule are.
So Pete asked you a sense of the timing for this, or what do you feel? Let me put it another way. What do you, as a select board chair, feel is important when this should get nailed down? What do you have in mind for that goal?
Well, it has to always be as soon as reasonably achievable. But the key word, I know reasonable is million miles, but what it means is, there is a potential that Augusta could still cause us some minor issues. Minor. I don't think it's going to get killed with the bill. There is some issues that some people have been trying to change in committee as we speak, and even revision's not happy with them. So we're watching it really carefully, being optimistic. So that's one, makes it difficult and then comes the negotiation of something. And then comes in parallel comes the size and cross-section of this array or expandability. And then comes the public process, which, we still, whatever we do in terms of this, Rough Garden will go through an analysis for us. And let's say we assume we absolutely want to do the solar option, which is a big array someplace, and we have these 4 options, we got to do an RFP. That's required. That's not a big deal. That takes some time period. That comes back, we have to still go through a public process of approval, you know that. And this one is a little bit different than the solar array at Sagamore because it's kind of small. Its financial impact potentially is only a couple $100,000. When you're talking about something a little bit larger, you could be talking over $1 million, $2 million, depending on the size. So we just got to get to that point. All I can tell you is a commitment to go as fast as reasonably achievable, and that should be reflected in what you should read when you do read Jeremy's report. It's not. I don't read it as in I'm more engaged in it because I do talk to Jeremy, as does Mark every day, and then you can comment on that, Mark. But I feel the energy, and that feels good.
I think to take what Bob said and put it in a sentence.
Thank you.
The people in town responsible doing these things are working as quickly as they can, and maybe sooner than later we'll have something to talk about.
Yeah.
And I would just like to reiterate my personal commitment to assist them in any way, shape, or form that I can,
you very much.
and in an effort to speed the process along, because I wouldn't want the personnel limits of the town stand in the way of making progress.
Well put, Pete, thank you.
And it does sometimes because we have limited staff. And believe me, I think one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about before I run out the door at some point is what the Energy Committee is actually working on right now, that what town needs. And by the way, there'll be more. I totally that's what the committee is here, as you well know, as an adjunct to the select board. But we want to make sure we're on the same page and working on the, to get the information we might need to help us make a logical decision as we move forward. Understood.
Are there any other questions on this topic that other members want to ask at this point? Okay, go ahead, Bob. Thank you.
We already
So-
discussed Sagamore Farm, I think.
Well, the town wanted to hold back on expanding the Sagamore Farm site, solar array site, because of their thoughts that there could be other uses for that site, and CDAC is working on that. And
Yes.
believe, I had a note from the last meeting about a walkthrough of the site. I think that related to this site, I'm not sure. But is there any way that the Energy Committee could be apprised of the progress with CDAC and
Well,
whether that site is not an option anymore or what?
I've never taken it off the table.
Okay.
I don't think anybody has, to my knowledge.
Right.
I know there was some frustrations developed. One of the focuses has been site access. There are site access issues that has to be resolved. And I believe, one thing to keep in the back of your mind, anytime you develop anything, whether it's a solar array or a house, you're gonna hit roadblocks. They happen. You gotta charge through them. You don't let them stop you.
Right.
You got to charge through them. So we're going to have those in any site we play with. Sagamore has some of those site access, not the least of which is access off Route 1 and easements and blah, 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 blah. But
So the publicly owned road exists, but there does not connect to the site where the solar array is.
Right.
And the solar array was constructed by using access through private property, which complicates it,
Does.
especially with expanding.
does.
Okay.
But it complicates it, but doesn't eliminate it.
It doesn't eliminate it.
Right. And I think they're pretty far downstream in identifying some ways of accessing from that general area you're talking about. And it might work. It might be a win-win.
There is an engineer studying the town, and it's not technically a road, town access through the town property. And so that's but there are tremendous difficulties there, and we're just looking to see
There are
what,
difficulties. I wouldn't put them on a tremendous list, but yeah, well, Sagamore Farm Road is not a road. It's an access road that that the people that, what, 3 or 4 people live there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's legally, because the people, it's legally not a road.
Correct. Correct.
And we shouldn't refer to it as that, because that has legalities involved with the
Technical
people
stuff.
that live there. So it is not a road, and it doesn't fit the criteria for a road at this point.
That's true. That's true. So, I think the biggest thing right now is site access and site hurdles that we.
And affordable housing that was discussed at a meeting that the watershed students attended with the budget committee, was it, or the select board?
That's one of the things that Jeremy Martin has put on the table to investigate. There's, and it's, there's some affordable housing. He's seen properties in one of the islands that they did there. And
Yes.
so he's looking, it's a good plan. He's looking to see if that's something that can work there. But
Right.
that's still way
Yeah,
far away
yeah.
from.
I think the one frustration that has been expressed, and certainly Pete has expressed it, is that there was a sort of a quid pro quo informal agreement between the select board and the, not that it holds water legally, and the committee, that we would do everything we could to get information to you regarding how we propose to use the site in terms of expanding the array. And at the same time,
Right.
the town, whichever entity, whether it's CDAC or the select board or whoever, would do whatever it is they wanted to do to decide, make decisions about the other thoughts they had for this property. And I'll just reiterate Pete's concern that, and our concern that the most real option that has come forward for that portion of that site has been the solar array, and the other options are not fleshed out, but they've been talked about since the
Right.
property was purchased in the 40s. So
No.
we're asking the select board to be,
Yeah.
to develop their clarity more quickly than
Well,
they have in the past.
Thank you, and I agree, Nita. I think I also want to clarify that we have had finally in this town a planning director. The planning director has been on for just over a year. Along that year, by the way, we have strategically made some mistakes with the utilization of his time. We loaded up the fall, winter with ordinance stuff. One person's identifying what they think is important for the town, maybe not the other person's. But the bottom line is there was a time period, candidly, when Jeremy was spending 95% of his time on ordinance development. That is not correct. I'm
Not his job.
embarrassed to say it, but it's the truth. And that, I think that's partially our not prioritizing effectively.
Thank you.
So I just want to be candid. But the key is, he is here now. He understands all these things. And I feel from my, tenure with the town, and not just in the select board, that I see a lot more activity to these things than I've ever seen before.
In terms of
Is it
planning.
fast enough? No, it
In terms
never
of
is.
planning,
But as
yeah.
town management, the comments are made about
Yeah.
governmental speed. But remember, I said earlier, Sagamore's not off the list in the solar array discussion. It's on the list.
Good. The timing and procedure for energy info and flyer.
That was something we
So-
discussed with Janet.
So I sent a query, hopefully to get enough of an answer by tonight, regarding the procedure we need to be aware of in order to get information to the voters, to
Yeah.
the residents that receive tax bills,
Yeah.
as our proposal of how to get information about energy to residents.
Right.
We recognize that this has to be agreed to by the select board, the town manager, whoever else. We just need to know A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's the process? What do we need to do? Who do we need to talk to?
Well,
And
Mark, you can help me a little bit here. I think this is really a fundamental of, well, first of all, tax bills don't go out until, August, September, I think?
I even asked that question, and that was not answered in my.
Well, no,
my
it
list
is,
of
because we
questions.
don't have the information yet for send out anything yet on tax bills for the next cycle. And I believe it goes out around August, September, I think.
It's due in October, I believe.
Well, the first one's due in October, but
Yeah,
we
so-
send it out before that. I
Right,
think
no, I
it's
know
no
that.
later than September. But to get something put in there, I mean, at the end of the day, we're town is sending out the bills. The town has to approve anything that goes
Right, of
into
course.
that envelope.
Of course, you
So-
don't have to, we just need the information. We need to know what frame, what steps, and is it possible? Is it okay to do this? I mean, should we even move forward with writing a flyer and creating a flyer? We just need to know the reasonable process
Yeah, I
to do
understand,
this.
and I've got to be careful that I don't speak for the select board, because I don't. I think this may be one of on the items on the list that I would encourage the chair of this committee to come to the select board in the next weeks to talk about work scope and get it on the agenda. We're doing that. we did
Next
it-
meeting's tomorrow, and I don't
Oh,
think
no,
they've
not
gotten it
tomorrow.
on the
Tomorrow's
agenda.
way too late. I'm talking about June. Tomorrow night, we do have, I think the Conservation Commission is doing exactly
Roger's doing a
that.
presentation.
Which we're trying to, this is part of this liaison powerful thing, because remember, in that document talks about work scope for committees that the select board has, well, generally agreed with as part of because we're looking for help, we're looking for information and help. If there are items that want to be discussed that are not in that work group or work action plan, great. Let's talk about them. This might be one of them. To clarify.
This is information, one of our jobs is to inform the public. This is trying to find the most
I get
efficient
that,
way
but
to do
I
it.
thought you were asking how to get this flyer, how do we develop, who writes it? Do you want us to write
Well,
it?
we'd be happy to write it.
I
We
got
just
that. I
We
got
just
that.
need to know,
I got that as a select board decision.
we want to do things right.
Yep.
And in the right
Perfect.
timing.
So I think that's one of the items I would put on a select board. I think that we would like, if you would like us to, we'd like to write this, and put a draft together, get it approved and get it into the tax bills. That's all.
Okay, so it sounds like the process then is to write one, present it to the board, and ask that it be
I think
included?
Before you write something, I'd ask somebody if you want it written.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, what if, I'm exaggerating to make a point, what if somebody in the town was already writing it? I'm exaggerating to make a point.
Oh, we already know who would be happy to write it.
Yeah, I get that, but I'm trying to talk to a process, and the
Yeah,
process is.
and that's what I'm asking.
That's what we want.
Right, and the process.
What is the
The
process?
process is.
Select board.
You get select board and say, select board, we
We wanna do
recommend that we write this information, get it done by July 1st, whatever, we pick a date, and then we'll bring it back for approval, and then select board, do you want it done? And I'm exaggerating, but sometimes we've had, the committees come to us and say, we did this, and everybody says, oh, really? Well, we already did it over there. It doesn't happen often, but that can happen.
Yeah.
Well, that actually, I feel like we need to be doing, we can all take responsibility for doing better at communicating, and it's nice to have you here doing, and I feel like I've learned a lot. This, of course, when you learn, you end up having a whole lot more questions. But I do want to, it's like on one level, I'm thinking again, in terms of expedience, wouldn't it make sense for us to say, here's a draft, approve it, and at the same time, or don't, or suggest changes, and then also approve, yes, we approve that something that we ultimately will have approved will go in that bill, because then that gives us the confidence that it will happen, and that it also gives us the impetus to make sure that we've got something that you would approve. We could certainly float it around for pre-approval, but I think what we're trying to do is not wait till the June meeting and then the July meeting. If there's any way we can speed these things up, it may be useful.
I think maybe what we'd do is just make up a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and put that before the select board and say, this is how we figure we probably have to proceed with this process. Does that sound right?
Basically what it is this is how we think we can help you.
And that would be a good way for you. You would see that as productive.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
We'll do that.
I do. I think because, well, first of all, in this one instance, we have a little bit of time. We're lucky. and this doesn't usually work this way. Sometimes we get to get things done yesterday. But in this one, we have a little bit of time. So if you come to the select board and say, we'd like to draft this thing, for the flyer, and the select board says, fine, go get it done, bring it back.
I think one of the key things is write an example of what you want to put in come to us with the prepared
Exactly.
piece.
Absolutely, yeah, we want to write a flyer.
It doesn't say, you don't
Yeah.
need to come to the meeting and say,
Yeah.
hey, we'd like to do something.
Yeah.
This is what we would like to
Absolutely.
include.
Well put. I think if you had, we want the flyer to cover these 4 points, 5 points, 6 points, whatever it is. Yeah, that helps because it gives meat on the bone for us. And we can make it's easier to, but we don't want to draft what should be in it.
No,
We've got it.
We're not good at that.
We're on it.
All right. But there are other things that I think the Energy Committee potentially may think about that would be in the same category. We want to do blah, blah, blah. We think would this be a help? And it's the same thing. We want to hear it. We have to be.
By the same token, we'd like to hear, and I think this is part of what is concerning to me, just based on our last go-round, that there's perceived animosity between the committee and the town sometimes. So let's just make sure that that we reiterate that we would like to take some of the jobs off of the hands of town employees,
But I'd like
whatever
to ask
those
the
are.
other members, do you perceive an animosity between the committee and the select board?
Don't ask the newcomer.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at you, Ann, I'm sorry. No, I mean, I'm curious. If that's the case, I want to hear it.
I don't know that I would characterize it as any animosity per se, but I think to Pete's point about the speed at which we would like to see things moving, we see the ship as sinking, and thinking about how we're going to address the problem of the boat sinking maybe a little after the fact. We need to be putting our fingers in the holes. We need to be putting duct tape on. We know it's not a permanent fix. And so it's just more, I think, looking to get a closer alignment of goals and making sure that we're all on the same page and progressing.
Right.
And again, I think we have this guiding document, if you will, which is the Global Covenant of Mayors that helps us. And that was a big part of why we brought that forward. And we were thrilled that it was adopted because it gave us all a mission focus. And I think that's where I see it.
And that's what I would share that. I think that's why I keep coming back to the work action plan for committee. It's established supposedly at the front of every year, but it can't live for a year. Things change. So like this flyer thing, that's a great example. Let us know. Let's communicate about what you want to write and what should be in it. But that's not the only item. And my point is, there may be more. I believe there is more. But we can discuss those together. I think that's great. The last thing I want to happen, I've gotten so many, and maybe Mark has too, so many committee chairs come and say, Bob, we're so tired of working on stuff, and then we come to the select board and you reject it. And I'm saying, that's not good. You people are helping us out. You're not our enemies. You're our allies. You're our asset. And we look forward to using that asset effectively. So, but I have seen happen was committees went off on doing something that the select board wasn't completely aware was going down, and maybe in the bigger issues wasn't communicating the status of that action item. And all of a sudden we got this thing, a drawing, a report said, oh my God, that's what happens, Pete, and everybody. That's really, we can't do that. Your time is too valuable. Our time is too valuable, and we have a lot of stuff on our list right now. Make sense?
Thank you. That's very helpful.
I might, one other point to your point, Anita, is in terms of trying to determine the steps, a conversation with, for example, Janice and maybe with Katrina Oakes to figure out what are the timelines. If something were to be included, when would they need to have it printed and so forth, so we can work backwards, because the select board will have no
They won't know.
practical knowledge on that, I suspect.
No.
So we can maybe get some fundamentals on
Sure,
that side of things,
sure.
and content and
Absolutely.
general approval
Yeah.
that would need to
Yeah.
come through the select board.
Okay, thank you. I think we're ready to move
All right.
on that issue. So the next item here. Are you still able to stay with us, Bob? I know we're going kind of late.
Everybody can have dinner without me. They can wait for me, as long as I have a drink when I get there.
Yeah,
Remember, you
okay.
I'm going to have a drink later, people.
To need one.
So, questions about the lighting ordinance.
Yes.
It's something that we've batted about in this committee for a
Yes,
long time.
you have.
And our understanding has been that other people and other entities and organizations or departments or boards are doing this next week, next month. It's really happening, and
Yeah, good question.
we don't hear anything.
What is the
Lighting ordinance.
Lighting ordinance.
For the town of Camden.
Like light
So it's
bulbs.
producing some, what our committee would like to see is some clarification in the town ordinances regarding particularly issues relating to light pollution,
Yeah.
light
Yep.
spillage,
Yep.
and light
Yeah.
trespass,
Yeah, I understand.
and to move our town towards a dark sky town, meaning that we're not polluting
I understand, I
all
understand.
the
I
atmosphere. Is
understand
there
the
anything
objective
else
of it.
that anybody wants to clarify in terms of what we're looking for in that regard?
This is,
Like trespass is kind of the major.
This is item 2 on the list so far, on the list of what the committee could come to the select board and suggest that, we already know, by the way, the lighting ordinance is there. What has occurred, I danced around it briefly about in the past where, yeah, I got to tell you, I was not overly happy with some of the hindsight of some of the ordinance stuff we got just on the ballot next month. It's to a lot of people very important. Is it more important than lighting ordinance? You know what? I can't. I'm not going there. Is it less important? I'm not going there. But I know that we need to know. One of the things about ordinance is that they take quite a bit of time, especially when they go through the planning board and et cetera. And we have to monitor that better than we have.
One thing I'll add, the planning board has been talking about this for years.
And that's what we've been assured
Yep.
as we discuss it within committee.
Right.
And I think what the committee would like is some clarity
Yep.
on whether this is something the committee can do, which we'd be happy to write it up and present and say, here's a suggestion.
Yeah,
Can
you see,
can we
I
run
mean,
this through-
careful, because,
Someone else doing it.
well, we do
See?
have the capability of doing that today that we didn't have a year ago. I'll admit that, and they've been done well. That has an advantage. But the biggest thing I've noticed in my opinion, Mark can comment on this too, but I think when we've had an outline of what the ordinance intent is specifically, in other words, I'm exaggerating, I don't want any light bulbs in downtown Camden at all. We don't just exaggerate, make a point. But bullet points, because turning that criterion into ordinance language is not so difficult for us to do. Because there are legalities to ordinances. And we do have to go through certain reviews of wording, and we do have to go through legal review and that kind of thing.
And I'm going to remember what you said about the apportionment of Jeremy's time on working on ordinances, because I did sit down with him and he asked me to come in and consult with him on lighting ordinances, and we talked about that process and going through the planning board. So I think my commercial to you guys in the select board would be to pigeonhole who's doing it and what's the timeline.
I agree with you. I agree
So
with you.
if you could just, maybe that would be helpful for us to say,
Well-
okay, you guys have had it in your court for a year, nothing's happened, we're taking it out of your court, and we're bringing it into this court.
Now, all I'm
be
trying
helpful.
to do is give you some non-select board advice from my experience with towns and cities doing ordinances. And that is, writing the actual ordinance is not the challenge. The challenge is what's going to be in the ordinance. So we have one recently going on in terms of the inland waterways thing that's forthcoming, and we're telling them, what we want to know is what you're trying to control, manage, and blah, blah, blah. Give us a summary of that, then we'll turn that, versus saying, committee, go write the ordinance. That can be troublesome, because
sure.
you just know that,
I think that then you could rest assured that the town already knows what that is. They already have those bullet points.
Well,
Jeremy has
as the
those
chair of the
bullet points.
select board, I just want to say that I have not had clarity on who's doing it. I mean, just tell us, it's the Energy Committee's job. Great, we'll do the bullet points, we'll bring them to you, we'll start the process. But as a chair of the select board, what I have, the message I've gotten is, so-and-so is doing that. That entity is doing that.
Yeah.
They're doing it right now. They're
Yeah.
doing it next week, and so we've been hands-off, but we can't hold anyone to task. We don't even know who to hold to task. We just want clarity.
Well, and the only clarity I can give you is, as I suggested earlier, when we come in and talk, what the key elements of this ordinance want to create, want to manage, whatever you might call it. And then we have to look at we can set the policy of looking at these kinds of things. And then,
I would suggest, I think any ordinance will be written by Jeremy with help of Bill Kelly.
oh, absolutely.
And I would suggest that recommendations, the thing that come forward with is, what are the recommendations the energy wants to include in a town lighting ordinance? It's that simple, and that should come.
That's already written, so I'll just send it to you.
I suggest you bring it to this discussion we have about work scope for,
Right.
just as a topic item, that's
Yeah.
all, and bring that with it, that's fine. By the way, you can send it to me, I'm not saying don't send it, please do. But that's good, but I'm just trying to say, I mean,
In the sense of helping Jeremy, because I think if he needs more, I mean, I've already had this discussion with him, he has those points.
And that, we'll discuss it as a committee, just to have clarity
That's cool.
where we
That's
are.
cool.
The other thing that Bob mentioned is, at some point, we're going to have to, and primarily Audra, will have to figure out Jeremy's priorities.
Yes.
The scope of his job is.
Absolutely.
The biggest problem he has is every committee, every select board person, the town manager, all have different priorities for him.
That's right.
And we have to sit down and figure out overall, what are the most important
That's your
things for the town.
job as a select board.
Right, and that's the most important thing. So,
And ancillary to that is let us know what those priorities are.
So we learned I learned just by watching a select board meeting that Jeremy or Audra or somebody decided to drop the lighting ordinance off because that's just what fell off the end of the table because of all the other ordinances.
Yeah.
That's the first that our committee heard about that.
Well, remember, if we know, and the select board in particular knows that this is what it is and what it's going, and it's not being addressed, we know also to say, to tell you all that it's not going forward right now. We know that. I don't think, I didn't know a thing, and I'm not excuse, reason, about the lighting ordinance until I saw on a list of 13 ordinances that was put in front of us to prioritize. And I looked at it and said, oh my God, 13 ordinances, you know how much time that would take? So a bunch fell off the truck. Was it right? Debatable.
To squeak more.
Well, or I feel what I'm hearing you say is, hey, if a big priority of yours is moving solar acquisition and implementation forward, then you may have to put the lighting ordinance on the back burner, but you could still be, you could say, okay, when such time as that rises once we've ticked off these others, we should have something in place so that we can hit the ground running.
There you go.
I think what happened the last time
That's perfect.
is Jeremy got to the point where he was spending about 120% of his time on too many ordinances now, and he's not allowed to work 120% of the time.
I think we're all in agreement that was bad.
There finally was a decision made to cut down the workload and take the ordinances that were pretty much ready for this ballot. Just wasn't enough time to get everything ready. It was overwhelming, and sometimes it's a matter of time.
We had, on that list of what was supposed to be worked on, about 3 or so that were worked on and they're not on the ballot. Stuff happened. I should stop. We had to take a time out.
But just to be a little more clear,
Yeah.
we were told the planning board was working on lighting ordinance.
That I can't help you with. I don't
And,
know. I don't see how the planning board would be ready.
I can say that it was worked on for a long time, but the new board has not brought it up.
I didn't think so.
I didn't think so, because Bob and I go to all those meetings.
So basically, we'll come to the select board and we'll try to put it on our plate, right?
We'll have to make it, it'll have to.
We want to, we know, by the way, the select board already knows lighting ordinances, you know, at least 3 or 4 of us do, it's a priority. I think it's most important to, I think Pete characterized it pretty well. Just make sure we have ready the criterion that's going to go into this, drafting
Okay.
these words of this thing, right?
Thank you for that clarity. Does
Sure.
anybody else want to say anything on that topic before we move on? Okay, the new middle school, what
yeah.
can we do to get solar installed during and at construction?
Can I turn this off now?
On the roof of the middle school?
Understood. I think that will be a part of the priority of the piece of Rough Gardens Town's
Good.
analysis of other buildings. And that's not just the middle school, by the way. There's some other schools we could play with too, that I believe could need to be part of that analysis and use that as a tool to say, you know what, we can do this on your roof and it ain't going to cost anything. And it's going to blah, 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 blah. And that's what we're going to have to drive
Okay.
it. We're going to have to drive it. I have to be fair to in a sense, to the school board and company. They've gone through some stuff with that middle school. They would probably have the rest of my hair's gray, but it's not over. Budget challenges. And for whatever reason, I don't understand exactly why a PPA would scare anybody. But,
This is what we've had trouble understanding since the get-go.
And by the way, we have no control of the school board.
Right, we know that.
And not that I really want to necessarily, but it's not off the table.
But our taxpayers,
Absolutely, absolutely.
so it's-
if we
That's
can-
true, but the school board is the elected body that has to deal with that.
That's right.
It's not, we can recommend, and we have.
that's all
We can
we
talk
we
about
know
it,
you can
but
do.
it's not our responsibility to insist or make or.
Pick your
anything.
battles.
We don't have.
Well, I'm
we don't
hoping-
have the authority, we don't have the standing to go to them and
I would
insist.
hope we
that
could
per se.
develop a compelling argument
Thank you, that's what we
that
need.
nobody could refuse.
Thank you.
It ain't going to hurt you. It's going to help you. Why would you refuse it? Timing of it may be an issue because I'm still building a school, but you can retrofit this stuff. It's not a
Yeah,
big deal.
right.
But that's where that one's at, right? It's not off the list.
Thank you very much for
Sure.
saying that. Anybody want to ask a question on that topic before we move on? Last item, thank you for staying for all of this, Bob.
That's all right.
We
That's all
appreciate it. So has the select board discussed the generic issue of whether new companies locating in Camden would inform the planning board of proposed energy use and energy savings measures? In particular, this is not just like, I have a store with so many lights. It's more like I'm proposing an industry that will use a fair amount of energy in doing what it's doing. We want to know whether the town is going to position itself to weigh in on energy use, and particularly if we are setting goals to be energy neutral in the future.
Right.
If that's what our goal will be, then that will impact all companies, including new companies. And we would want to weigh in with those companies when they're making their plans about our concerns about minimal energy use, and how can we
Yeah.
shape something?
There are 2 elements to that. First of all, there's one element of somebody coming in and building something, which, not a school, but where they need to follow certain energy codes today, which our newer buildings do, LEED certified, that kind of thing, which I've done a ton of them myself, to increase the sustainability, energy utilization, renewable energy use, blah, blah, blah. So that's one category. It's kind of black and white. It's easier. In this town, we have most of what our business and commercial is here is people leasing space in the towns, in buildings that are not hellishly efficient. And that's where this kind of plays in my mind. And that really comes to whether or not we can identify, when we go through the permit process, we have a huge checklist of things the planning board goes over, including site lighting, as I recall, is an element.
Exactly.
But there could be other elements in that checklist.
Would energy be, I don't know if Brian wants to say this in a way that's more clear. This is the field in which he works.
I know.
And building energy. So can energy be incorporated into a planning board's review
Well, the can is yes. I mean, the question is, what is it? And that's where you're talking about developing, what is it? Again, I think that should be bullet 3 so far on the discussion with us about, this is ideas that y'all have been talking about.
Okay.
And I like it. I like it. I think the idea that beyond LEDs, that, it's kind of a black and white thing. But I think there's another element to it the town might want to think about, and that's, maybe it takes a little bit more time to develop it, but what can we do to help or encourage the existing building owners in this town to do a little bit more too? They're the shell owners, they own the shell. We've had huge tenant improvements done on Bayview in the last weeks with 2 new galleries, a new store, moving of a store. I don't think a heck of a lot was, and a new building owner, by the way, to one of the buildings there, from Boston, I believe. What can we do to encourage them to make it more now, while they're getting ready to do, this building I call tenant improvements, the internal build-out, to make the building more.
So what would the Energy Committee's role be, potentially,
Yeah.
be in seeing that energy consciousness and action take place at the business level?
It would have to, if again, discussing at the select board level, my opinion is you would look at what areas can the town look at for doing something with building owners to incentivize them to, use heat pumps. I don't know. You pick at what it is, stop. Well, I'm sorry, good discipline. To encourage the building owners to do things that may improve some of the energy. Like across the way here, I see condensers on these buildings. They're not hellishly efficient, in my opinion. I think that the world of heat pumps has gotten so sophisticated. An example that they, which the Bayview Hotel does have. And so those kinds of things we could certainly think about. It's complicated.
It's very complicated.
But we don't have to solve it tomorrow. We just have to work on it.
But we're just trying to
Figure it out.
add to the town's menu is a communication, the town's role in communicating to business owners what the town would like to see.
Which I come back to the Global Council of Mayors, because we already have a framework that, and so, at some point, the town is going to have to say, no, I'm sorry, you have to be net zero. You can't come to this town unless you show us a plan, and we made that may not be.
That's what we're proposing at this point.
Well,
but
it's going to happen.
We certainly want to start building that awareness in
The consciousness.
and try to find ways to encourage or fund or rebate or whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question. It's one thing that I've gone around with because I see it as a problem. We have on the ballot the ability for people to do growing marijuana.
Right.
And there's a huge energy usage.
This is an example. And this is why actually this is.
Like a snowball?
The usage for growing is particularly indoors is.
Oh, I get it. I get
Is
it,
huge,
yeah.
and they will use tremendous amount of electricity, which will throw our global covenant numbers way off. How do we legislate that? How do we approach that?
That's why we need to wrestle with this question.
Sure,
Before
sure you
we
do.
actually
Sure you do. It's
aggravate somebody.
Well, there's a whole topic of where we go and how we get there. I'm personally extremely concerned with where the overall planet is heading from an electrical energy perspective right now. I believe we're effectively, because of technology, we're dead in the water. What I mean by that, you talk about net zero. Okay, that's net metered zero in the town. That's not net zero. I'm sorry, I'm just being heavy because AI. Other elements of technology are electrically killing us. I'd have the opportunity and not to build data centers all over the planet. Or you all do, they're energy hogs.
Amazon and Google.
Well,
and stuff like that.
I can tell you there's one right now, I think it's almost finished, Apple in Athena, Georgia. It's 1 million square feet. 300 megawatts of power. And that's one.
That's the requirement. That's what they are sucking, using.
That's they
Well,
install.
it's carbon net zero. It doesn't mean you can't build a solar facility or
Yeah,
other renewable
unfortunately,
facility.
300 megawatts is not going to work with solar because you have to have it, unless you don't mind your internet going down on occasion when there's no sun. It doesn't work.
Well, you'd have to have battery backup or
Well,
something.
I don't want to get into the technical aspect. My point is, the 500 company, the 500 data centers being built like that in the world today, just for the top 5. And all I'm bringing up is this is
500
serious
data
stuff.
centers?
500 data centers only for the top 5, just for Amazon, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Apple, just those 5. 500 at the end of this year. Not all this year, by the way. 500 times those megawatts, you're not carbon neutral. I'm telling you, you're not. They're backed up by diesel generators, and a couple of them have tried geothermal, didn't work. In some cases, they had us installing dual power supplies because of having to have the guarantee of 365, 24/7. Is it solvable? Yeah, it is. I'm just saying it's there. And that worries me because you know what? I don't see anybody that will and should maybe do anything to stop the utilization of our little cell phones and our computers and AI. It's huge. The projections are, 20-something% per year going forward.
Right, and I think that we unfortunately I feel like as the town, we have to, at some point, we're going to specify goals
Yeah.
as part of that Global Council of Mayor.
Yep.
And there'll be a year which we say we have zero carbon footprint. Now, what
Yep.
that year is, we'll have that debate.
I understand.
But no matter what that year is, if we say, okay, that year is 2050, that's going to mean radical changes to everything. And I think that is the part that it would be great if the select board were able to start to get that message out to people, like everything must change.
Yeah, understood.
And so that's why we asked for the Global Council of Mayors, is to get this idea out. And hopefully people that are watching are also understanding that we're in a climate emergency.
Well, and it's going to take life changes, and the people are going to have to vote on that. Right? So I agree. Get the information out so people can make an intelligent choice. But anyway, I digress. But I think it's important just to give you where I think, I do worry about the macroscopic. Not the least of which I had the benefit of traveling the planet. And I got to tell you, when you go to Europe or other parts of the world and we talk about our energy conservation in America, they laugh at us, honestly. I'm sorry, but they do.
Yeah.
We're 2 times per capita any country in the world because we have to have our ice in our glasses and we have to have our air conditioning and blah, blah, blah. So to your point, I agree with you, Pete. I agree with you.
I think
it's,
Bob's right. That's something that people are going to have to vote on. And so the education process
Oh, it's huge.
is not just from the
That's
select
huge.
board, it's from everybody.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if the select board is saying, guys, we're in this Global Council of Mayor process, and
Right.
next year we're going to be choosing goals
that you will vote on.
that you will vote on.
Yep. Information.
And those goals are likely to have to be fairly draconian, which is going to require some massive changes. And so how can we help? I think as a select board, it could be useful to be
I don't know that this,
giving that, just say, if you don't have to say the draconian changes part, but you do have to say, we are in the second year of a 3-year process where we will have to hard code our goals.
Understood. Communication is key in everything you do in life. They may vote for it, not vote for it. That's, but we can educate them. Anyhow, I think, to your, I don't think I gave you a very good answer to your question about commercial building. I think it's a tough one because it's just something, it's a parallel program that we might take a look at. And I would also, certainly add anything to the list we're talking about, to talk to the select board about where, but how to implement that. I think we need a little bit more flesh on the bone about where that might go and how it might go in a town like Camden, because I don't really think we're going to be doing a lot of greenfield construction here. I just don't feel like it. It's going to be the odds-on
Right,
project.
right.
I think there's going to be a lot of retrofit, renovation, that's going to continue. Maybe the thing is, maybe we focus on that bit first and figure out what we want to recommend or provide incentives for to building owners to help them in the process, whatever it is. That can work.
And
That
Jeremy is working on something in that regard. Is there anything we can discuss today regarding that?
You mean Energy Maine?
Well, I guess you already did mention it with regard to the trust funds
Yeah,
and
yeah.
possibility of using.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to investigate those things because it's not just good enough to say, do it, without, but certainly some residential, that would be true. People can't afford it, and they just don't. What the problem is, they don't have the X thousand dollars to put in up front to
right.
save money downstream, right?
So those are the kind of things that you could say, Energy Committee, draft us a draft plan for how we might go about coming up with leveraging our town funds in some sort of community bank or who knows what to go towards energy retrofits. That's the kind of thing that I would think that's where we can help, is by doing some of the legwork.
But we have a step before that. We have trusts that are all generally dedicated to certain specificity of how you use them, not the least of which is one used for milk money.
Yeah.
We're trying to get that changed because obviously the times have changed, and we need to look at, and in some cases, we may have to go to court with that.
Right, but it's akin to the idea of the lighting ordinance. If we have a plan developed, when such time as the money comes available,
Yeah, understood,
there could be some, and so there could be real work in that regard.
I think it's fair to have a discussion about prioritization of this committee's activities, too.
Sure.
I mean, I don't want
Right,
you, you have a pretty
We have a lot
long
to do.
agenda here. And
So those extra people, send them our way.
There you go. I will. You may not want to accept, but, I'll send the resumes and have them filed with our system. But I think those are all great ideas. But the bottom line message that I know I think Mark agrees and all the rest of the select board, we just have to, we're trying hard to understand what you all are working on and where it's going. And it's very difficult because there's only 5 of us. And we're trying to monitor where things are going and how they're moving ahead. And I mentioned the things that have happened where we presented what I'm exaggerating, call it a fait accompli, and we go, oh boy.
Right, so again, if the fact that you are only 5, and you don't want to get surprised by things that come at you from left field, then I think it would be incumbent on you to very, very quickly say, here are our top priorities, and we would like you to go do these things.
Well, one of them is the survey that was sent to Anita for the lighting survey for the new real-term lights. I just sent to you, I believe, by the way. You probably haven't seen it yet. But this is a survey we need done. We need help. I'm not sure you can help, but we're asking for help. I think I heard it just went out, by the way. So in fairness, there are things that we need to look at now. Alternatively, well, at least in my mind, and I know a lot of people don't, I'd like to hear a little bit about, if there were time available, to what caused the situation with wind power in Ragged Mountain. What was the history there? I don't have it all. We don't have it all. We should not suggest we're bringing it up again, but I'm not prioritizing these, please. This is way down the list, but this one is definitely a high priority for real term. But the point is, it isn't what I'd like to see. It isn't what Mark would like to see. It's what the select board would like to see.
Right.
That's sure.
I think one thing that I'll say, the good news about this, as opposed to when I used to watch the board 5-6 years ago, this board is the most responsive, the most energy-aware board that we've had in a long time, and also the town manager and the new planning director, because what's happened in just the last 3 years, and where we've started from, when I started on the board, there were no votes for doing a solar farm in Sagamore, and where we are now in terms of where we're looking, what Jeremy's doing, what Audra is pushing us to do. It's extraordinary compared to where we've made tremendous changes, and we need to look at that and and I think sometimes it's a good idea to go to Jeremy and go to Audra and say, thank you for where you are and what you've been doing and how you've been managing it, because that goes a long way.
It really does. I
helping,
mean,
because the two of them have made tremendous strides.
I totally agree. I've been watching, a town watcher for a while, and I agree, it's been spectacular.
Completely different town government than it was 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
Right, so we just, again, what I, and we recognize that, I certainly do. And so what I'm saying is, let us help you. Tell us how we can help you.
Yes,
Instead of, well, we got this.
yeah.
Tell us how we can help
I
you.
don't think anybody in town said we've got this. I think we're talking about, and there's a lot of things going on, a lot of activity. And we like the real term thing. It just popped up as Audra's idea. We need help.
Did you say that you sent that? Because I didn't see it.
Audra did. If you didn't get whatever, I'll leave this with you, but it's basically a survey of the lighting poles that we have to do for real term as part of the town. Now, if you guys can't and don't have the bandwidth, that's cool.
We don't have this information. We have not done the survey.
That is, the survey is blank, it's all blanks.
So you're asking us to do the survey?
If you could, I mean, if you could, I mean.
Well, I think
Survey.
so that would be, I think, again, without having, and I haven't read the email yet, but we had, I think Anita had a list of something like 25 questions for real term. Did you ever get any answers to those questions?
Well,
No, I
all we
did
had
not.
to date is a kickoff meeting with Real Term.
Right.
When Audra was away. I think in June, that'll probably come to fruition. And
Right, so what I'm saying is perhaps what we should have is an energy committee member looped into those meetings with real term so that we're not getting it, so that we can be logistical support as needed. For example, we could be talking to real term instead of having things, there be some confusion over who's doing what in those strategy meetings with real term and the town. If there was one of us that was tasked to, like, what support role can we play and what exact tasks and what's the timeline, that
That's
would be
exactly
helpful.
what's going on right here.
Okay.
If you can't do it, that's cool too. I understand that. It may not be something you have a bandwidth for.
Yeah, if I can just step back to the building energy piece of
Yep.
things.
Yep.
Certainly, there are, I think, maybe even some very simple ways that we could leverage, existing energy codes and say new development in town would need to exceed, say, the 2015 International Energy Code standards for residential and commercial building, something along those lines, which
Yep.
might be accessible. And if we want to incentivize the most energy efficient use, which is, as you suggested, retrofit of existing structures, because when you take the structure down, all that embodied energy is gone.
Correct.
And, Pete's got to pick on you, Pete, a brand new, passive house.
Sure, sure.
But there was a lot of energy that went into building that,
Yeah, of course.
that passive house.
Of
And
course there is.
so I think there are ways that we can incentivize both commercial and the residential to the most energy effective way to do things.
Yeah. Well, we needed, incentivization is a key word, because we also want to stay competitive with the rest of the world in terms of.
And I think that's right. And then, letting people make the choice as to how they want to
Yeah.
sort of achieve that. But we can certainly set
Yeah.
a higher standard, a higher base, because
Yeah.
the current energy codes that we look at in Maine for MUBEC is 2009.
No, I thought they just passed.
No, they just
passed a
updated.
new
didn't they?
one.
Didn't they,
Maybe it's to
Brian?
2012
I'm not sure. I
now.
thought they
It
just.
could be.
Yeah,
It
I'm
may have
not
just
sure.
been
I'm
very
not sure
recent.
what
But
version.
there's still,
Yep.
remember, and that code is not good. That code is just not failing.
It's true.
So building codes are not a high standard. They're in fact the lowest passable
Well,
standard that
building
you can
codes don't
have.
require LEED certification, so, I'd start right there. But anyway, I get all that. I think, but it also, and when you talk about these things, when Anita or whoever comes to the select board, we're also very cognizant of the fact that the resources of this committee are limited. It doesn't have, unlimited resources to work on a, blah, blah, so you got to push back too.
It's absolutely true.
And prioritization is important too.
Right.
Right now, that one item is of a priority because we
Okay.
want to make sure real term stays on track. And
So,
the process is working.
Thank you. We've gone way over our time and way over your time.
Right.
And the agenda extends, but I think we'll make a decision as a committee as to whether we want to address these issues at another time.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. It was great meeting you all, the ones especially I didn't know as well.
This is very, very,
Coming in.
Well, yeah.
Extremely helpful to have you
I don't think I
here.
had all the answers, but I didn't think I would, because we don't yet. We probably never will.
and I want to reiterate that how cognizant we are of what the town is doing and really moving very quickly.
Yeah.
It's quite a dramatic improvement, and
Oh.
we're appreciative of it at the select board level, at the select board chair level, at the planning
that.
office level, and at the town
We're very
manager
fortunate,
level.
we're very
So-
fortunate to have a very diverse select board group. I don't, never will, think we do anything better or worse than anybody. We're doing the best we can. It's been draining, I'll tell you. It's been very draining. The backlog is higher than I thought it would be. And yes, we have people legitimately coming to us with concerns beyond the Energy Committee, of course, that are equally passionate about what they need done yesterday, and at the same time, maintaining the tax bills so they don't go out of sight. That's a real challenge. We have issues, so, and believe me, we don't poo-poo or, do we communicate perfectly?
No, but I think we try to be responsive to as much as we possibly can.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think it's a real good board right now. And,
I think it is too. I just leave you with that issue then that we discussed, all of us, the communication is, is very important. And I think the first step would be deciding which on the list of the things that are.
I don't think we've done that enough. We talk a lot here, but we haven't, as a
That's-
committee, come forward to you.
We
and
haven't,
really-
we haven't called for you to come, Anita. That's wrong too.
But that's one of the things we're trying to do, is ask people to make reports on a regular basis.
Yeah.
That's why Roger Rittmaster's
Yeah.
coming tomorrow night.
That's why you came to our meetings.
It's true. But I came here to tell you to come and talk to us, because I can't remember everything anymore.
We need to be more disciplined in every other meeting, having a committee chair come and give us a chat about what they're doing and how they're doing it.
It would be interesting to know whether, given your preference is to hear directly from the committee, are we taking too much of the select board members' time to have them coming to our committee meetings? 'Cause
At times,
that takes
at
a
times,
lot of their time.
at times, I've had to, Mark is very diligent about
I
it.
think it depends on, some members don't have the time or the ability
Right.
to do. I like
Yes.
going to as many meetings as I can, which my wife finds very interesting, and my son does as well, but they've adjusted well, so.
Well, I think what it boils down to is, but I said before, the liaison's there. It's written up, and we've embellished it a little bit in here, saying the liaison's there for procedural advice. Does not represent the select board. And we say it that way because the word hasn't been coming back effectively, because it's a time problem. We have a select board meeting to run, we have select board reports, and I say, yeah, I met with the Energy Committee, and we reviewed the agenda, discussed energy, and I can't possibly go over the detail that I went over here tonight in half of it without we'd be up to midnight with our select board. So we've had an issue there.
Yeah.
So we're trying to figure out how do we get this communication between valuable committees, commissions, boards to us on a more regular basis to get this flow better.
Would you like to see that being initiated from the committee as a proposal? Can we come before the board, or would you like the board to make invitations to the committee to come at a certain?
In this case, I'm inviting you, but however, let's say we talk about a few items on the agenda that you want to add to your work plan, and we say, yeah, that's great, let's do it. I think coming to, you all should come to us and say, we're ready to talk about a couple, in outline form,
Right.
we're ready to talk
Right.
about the what's going to be in the flyer, bullet list wise. You don't have to write it all, but it's the more, because if you are collectively maybe heading in not quite the direction we thought keyword, then we can advise, maybe we should, go a little bit more this way, that's important. Because the thing I don't want to have happen, and has happened, is we brought this thing, whoops, we probably should have had some input in this before.
Yeah.
We didn't give specific enough direction.
So you don't want us to go too far without input?
If I'm in your shoes, I wouldn't, because I think it's smart to have, we know where it's going, and just so when we're finally putting the words on the ordinance, it's more of a formality than the
I
detail.
think one of the keys is also there are a tremendous amount of people, the tremendous amount of input, and the phrase I always try to remember is jack of all things, master of none.
Yeah.
When you have a
Yeah.
very important situation, make that a priority and come and discuss that,
Yeah.
instead of coming to discuss 4 or 5 things, because that all gets diluted.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Pick your spots and pick your priorities.
Yeah, pick your priorities, because this is a limited, you meet once a month? How often do you meet, energy, once a month?
Yes.
Once a month. That's once a month, and I know you do things outside of the meeting. I know that. You all do work really hard. But I'm also trying not to beat the hell out of you either, because that's not fair.
Takes a long time.
We've tried to prioritize things too. That helps us to, and by the way, prioritization is a personal opinion. When I might think is a priority, you might not, Anita, or you. I'm sorry, that's just what happens, We're dealing with it now we have been with capital issues, and it's a bear. I mean, there are some who want us to build something at the Snowball, there are some who want us to fix this and do that, and man, it's not adding it up, it gets tough. And then the initiatives, when you're putting out fires, you got to think about fire prevention. Right? And we don't, and that's like in a business, you have to do that. And I've always insisted on that, because when you're only putting out fires, you're losing. You're losing. So the things about lighting ordinances, the things about, flyers, that's fire prevention in general term. And we need those too. We're trying to balance those because we got to put out fires at the same time.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you all for
and
tolerating
spending all
me.
that time and extending your time here
That's
to
a-
answer our multitude of questions.
Well, I'm nowhere near as good as Jeremy would be at doing this, but since he couldn't make it, I wanted to make sure I
Really
did.
appreciate you doing that. Thank you
Thank you all.
much.
Thanks.
Should
Appreciate
I
it.
turn off the?
So, I just,
She stopped the turn.
I have not closed the meeting yet. I just want to bring up a couple other things for the committee. Thank you very much, Bob. We really appreciate it.
Well, I miss them. This is only our 4th meeting today with each other.
We sit at planning board together, we can pass notes back and forth, be cryptic.
So,
Nice to meet you.
basically, I do want to close the meeting, but in the agenda, if you could take that home with you or open it up at home, there's an item called flyer with info for tax bills. So he has asked for bullet points of what we'd like to cover in the flyer. I think that's enough to bring up at the next select board meeting in 2 weeks. What I would like you to do is give me feedback on that list that I made. Okay, there's,
Run that by also Janet, and they could maybe help.
okay,
Janet McMahon, the watershed.
Oh.
Because we were the ones who sort of suggested it in that meeting.
I think Marina would have some suggestions as well. But I just want to say, don't walk away without taking this long and thinking about it. And then I think we can do some of that communication by email. Is everybody okay with that? And then,
Can I ask a possibly stupid question that I've been looking at it. What was the item PACE?
PACE it's a methodology of basically you can liken it to an option of creating a mortgage-like method of payment for energy work. So a person, an individual with a residence that wants to do energy-related work can I think it's take a loan and pay it back with their tax bills on a regular, biannual basis.
It's like a community bank, effectively.
Yeah, so it's a way of getting a loan to do energy retrofit and paying it back on your tax bill on long-term, like a mortgage. And I can't get into further detail because I've sort of forgotten. It's been a long time since I studied it, but it's a
If you
funding mechanism.
Google it, there's like Efficiency Maine has a PACE program. So you as a resident, if you own your property. Yeah.
If I even knew what the initials stood for.
Okay.
Yeah,
So go to Efficiency Maine website. And the key is that a community or a municipality has to agree to have a PACE program in their community before an individual can proceed in that direction. So our town has accepted, has enabled people to do that, has agreed to have a PACE program in this community. That happened.
We don't have one, but they.
Our town has agreed to have a PACE community, and that has to be agreed to before a person can make the application to Efficiency Maine. And I'm really rusty. Brian probably knows a lot more about it.
It's just a way of financing energy-efficient improvements and paying it back over time. And the original genesis of it was that you were going to pay it back through, part of it through the savings on your energy bill, and it was going to be financed on your energy bill. So if you were in an area that had, say, natural gas and you were using natural gas, your financing for an improvement on your house that would reduce your building's demand for natural gas, you would pay that bill monthly on your gas bill, basically.
Sorry, did you say that Camden has agreed to have that program?
We're one of how many, what's the last number there, Pete? It's 190? Yeah, there's 190 communities and affiliated territories, or whatever we call them here in the state, that have adopted PACE financing, but there are some communities that have not. So they can't use that financing piece.
Do you know when this comes into effect? Like, when could you, like,
Well,
if
you
I
can borrow
want
right now.
It
The PACE
exists.
financing,
Yeah.
I helped the first customer in the state get a PACE loan in South End of Rockland in 2011.
Nice.
So it's been
we should
ongoing.
talk.
So that's a piece of information that our citizens would want to know about, but I'm not proposing that a flyer describe that. What I'm imagining is that the flyer would mention the different issues that we want to mention, and one or two sentences and a link or a reference as to where they can get more
Well,
information.
we did actually a few years ago, we had the town insert the Efficiency Maine trifold piece into everybody's tax bill. I don't know if you remember getting that,
Yeah.
but that was something that I had asked the town to do, and the state was supportive of that. They'll give us those folded and ready to go, and they just need
So
to
there's
get
a lot,
inserted.
I'm a little concerned, given that we have monthly meetings, that there's a lot actually to do to get such a flyer ready for the tax bills. They are coming sooner than we feel like, given that we're only meeting monthly. And we've talked about this since December or November. I'm finding it on our minutes from back then, the flyer.
Right.
So we basically haven't done anything, that's my fault. But if we want to do something, we need to move quickly.
I think it could be very simple, and it could be just, we are in year 2 of the Global Council of Mayors Agreement. This is what we're doing. This is what we're going to be doing next year. Stay tuned. You'll be asked to vote on the ultimate goals of the town.
But it's nice to give people, my thought would be to give them information and where they can get more.
Sure.
Yeah, and we could, I think, a series of links to places.
Right.
Most people, I think, would likely be getting their information that way. And if not, we could include a contact an email contact for us or
Sort
something that
of
we
an
could.
awareness building for the
Yeah,
community is
help
what's going
people.
on.
And again, I think making folks aware of these, some of these bullet points, these things that are being done and that are accessible to you, that would help reduce your carbon footprint and help us towards this larger goal, whether it be scrap dogs or what have you. There's a number of actionable steps that people can take right away, but contextualize it in that larger global Council of Mayors piece, that we're taking a deep dive here, folks, and we want to wrap our arms around you and to help you get
Yeah.
there.
Good, thank you very much. That other the item between the two bulleted paragraphs, I won't, I don't need to give a summary now, except to mention that the watershed climate change class, the teacher, Janet McMahon, some students, all the students from the class, Bob Falciani, and I think Allison also, all sat around a table at the Watershed School and talked about the Global Covenant of Mayors. And the Watershed students expressed some frustration. They had initially expressed frustration with the town back when the march to the town office took place, and said that they felt that they weren't being heard. The town office suggested they go to a budget committee meeting, which they did. Some students went to a budget committee meeting to inform them about the Global Covenant of Mayors and the work that the Watershed students are doing for the town. And they were disappointed that the members of the budget committee had no awareness of the Global Covenant of Mayors commitment. So there was a lot of talk at that meeting about how to increase awareness in the town of what's going on. That relates to the flyer. But that's something that we as a committee have a responsibility for as well, and we need to be thinking about how we're going to better communicate to the town about the Global Covenant.
And that's why I was hoping that we could get a commitment from the select board to basically frame everything that the town does in this wrapper of the Global Covenant of Mayors. In other words, imagine somebody says, oh, I'm thinking about, I want to build a new building. If you framed it in terms of Global Covenant of Mayors, you might say, well, that's great. How are you going to help us meet our goal, which is X?
And that's why that subject came forward, because actually, I was really pleased to get a call from Audra, the town manager, regarding the question of marijuana growers and the energy consumption by such a business. So I felt that was very forward-looking of her and very gratifying for her to recognize that there's an energy piece to that, and that would be of interest to our committee. So that's why the question about, how can we get the town to be looking at these in an official sort of way, the issue of energy on businesses. I think we should call it a night.
I second that.
Guys
All in
for
favor?
that? All right, thank you very
Aye.
much.